Welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Jennifer Stockberger.
And I'm Jake Fisher.
So we have another special edition of Talking Cars. They're all special.
They're all special.
But this one is especially special because we are going to talk about Consumer Reports' top picks. This is the best of the best, the greatest hits. Use any superlative that you want. But these are the vehicles that rise to the top of our ratings for lots of reasons that we will get into. And the best part, the real reveal here with this podcast is the article is free on consumerreports.org.
There you go.
So you can go there and dig into all the details and find out everything you want about our top picks. And that kind of brings us to you, Mr. Jake Fisher. And
what, me?
How do we get this top? How do we create Consumer Reports top picks?
Great question. So first of all, look, there's a lot of different types of superlative vehicles, right? I mean, there's Car of the Year and 10 Best and all these different things. And really when we pick our best of the best, right? Our goodest cars, right? That's why I'm the writer guy. We look at, first of all, I think we look at cars differently than other sources. And one of those things are, we really consider things like, reliability and safety, which amazingly enough, most of the lists that you see don't really consider these things, right? It's kind of like, hey, I drove the car around, on the press event and it drives nice.
0 to 60 and whatever.
Right. How does it do around the Nürburgring or whatever?
Sure.
This minivan, like that's really important. So really we look at those things that really consumers tell us that are super important. Safety, reliability, people putting their families in. It's not that important how fast it goes around a racetrack. So it's based on what we call the overall score, which incorporates all those things. And obviously when it comes to, safety, reliability is not, we obviously purchase all these vehicles. It's not how reliable it is for us. It's based on about 300,000 vehicles out there in the wild and people telling us how these cars are really holding together. And
you're referring to our famous surveys.
The famous special survey. Absolutely. So that's a big part of it. And then we're looking at, obviously we're the ratings people, right? So we have ratings in all these different categories, and we're looking at the categories that suit the most amount of people. And then we're looking at the ones that are really, either at the top of those lists or very near those lists. But, there's kind of a little bit what goes in the background and how we choose them. And it's not just purely mechanical, top of the list. It's that we're actually looking at these vehicles and we're looking at, what kind of safety equipment's available with that. We're looking at the price of these vehicles, how much it suits, and then we're choosing those best picks that we think are going to suit a lot of people. And
it's complicated and it's scientific. And Jen, it's not like we get into rooms like, well, I like this car, so it's a top pick. It's not even close to that, correct?
No. And there's a lot of thought that goes into it, again, into the scoring itself. But the way I look at it, not to just pile on with the superlatives, but these are the no-brainers. There is the shopper out there, for sure, and we've all met them. Just tell me what I should get. This list annually is those no-brainers. It ticks the boxes, including, Jake, to your point, the ones that have the safety features that we recommend and that we're incentivizing to be a top pick. It's all there. Pick one. Mm-hmm. Pick one. And there's many models that have like the hybrid variant of it, but pick one. As opposed to the person who wants to really delve into our ratings for a certain vehicle that meets their specific needs, which we totally encourage people to do. And we've said many times, our top pick may not be your top pick.
Absolutely.
Right? And to get in there and look at the ratings and find what suits you. These are the no-brainers of it does all of these things.
And this is really kind of how we set out our ratings, right? I mean, we're trying to make it clear that, yes, exactly, our top pick for this category might be this vehicle, but it's not the best one for everybody. Different people have different priorities, and we do our best to try to lay it out. It's like, so go down the list and pick that one because it does something that's really important to you.
And when you think about the evolution of our top picks, we've had different categories that some have come and gone through the years, and we've also continuously raised the bar. Yeah. We've required that manufacturers have standard safety features, not just on their top trim, but from the bottom trim to the top trim, and we continuously make it a little bit harder, not only for the vehicles to get Consumer Reports recommendation, but again, to reach the echelon of our top picks.
Very well said. And I think there's two kind of really interesting things that I think about when you talk about, how we've evolved. So one thing is we used to have this, like, the green choice.
Right.
Exactly. And what was it? The Toyota Prius was like this green top pick for many years.
Yep.
And, people looking kind of sharply at our top picks this year, you'll notice there's no Prius. Because you know what? There's a lot of green choices. You don't need to go and get the Prius in order to get that great fuel efficiency, right? I mean, you look at, things like a Camry. It's getting amazing fuel efficiency and being roomy and being all these things. Right. So that has evolved in itself that I think it's right now about 7 of the top picks are either some kind of electrification or available as electrification. So, I mean, wow, total explosion of that in the last 20 years. But the other thing is in terms of what's required to be a top pick. And I'm glad you brought that up. For instance, one of the things that we need to see is, not just automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, but we also want to see that automatic emergency braking, not just happen at low speeds, but also be available for you even at highway speeds, which most vehicles are doing. I mean, we had some discussions when it came to one of our small car top pick because of that, right?
Yeah. So and you're explaining why the top pick may not be the top rated, which is a common question. What do you mean? The Elantra Hybrid is at the top of the list. Why isn't that the top? Again, a great vehicle. Yeah, but it may be missing some of the elements that we're now saying, to your point, has to be there to be a top pick.
And sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Oh, and you brought up the Prius. And it's not a top pick. It's still a recommended CR car. It's still an amazing
great
car.
Yeah.
But it's just not quite at that level anymore. I suppose a lot of products have caught up to it in some ways.
A Prius is really interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people are like, what? How can a Prius not be a top pick? As always is. But again, it's like the market has changed, and if you could get nearly the same fuel efficiency out of vehicles like that Elantra hybrid or a Corolla hybrid or even a Camry hybrid, which, well, I shouldn't even say Camry hybrid.
Right.
They're all hybrid now.
We didn't say hybrid because they all are.
The world has changed.
Right.
So I mean, the Camry is getting better fuel efficiency than the Prius used to.
Right.
Just a few years ago.
Yeah.
So
and the Camry is a top pick. So I mean, just for clarification. And also for clarification, when you say electrification, you're talking about hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and pure EV. Because that term electrification can mean different things for different people.
Yeah, I mean, they all have 12-volt batteries, and ignition.
But to your point about greenness, we've also done a better job of indicating which cars are greener in our ratings throughout the year. We don't have to pull out the Prius because now there's that little green choice that says, hey, this is probably a fuel efficient and low emitting vehicle. We've done that.
Right. And some of the vehicles, kind of on the lower end, the more inexpensive ones aren't necessarily hybrid or plug-in hybrid and all that. Because, again, the cost is now, very important. So for everyone right now, it's not the best option. But we're seeing over the years more and more, and who knows, 5 years from now, they probably will all be hybrid or something.
Some level.
And that has, been part of the reason that we do what we do is we study the auto industry. And I know it's been fascinating for me to see the evolution of hybrids. And Jake, you've talked about this a number of times about even GM went into the hybrid thing. They had a hybrid Tahoe, for example, which was kind of crazy. But they were sort of fringy, and now they're way more mainstream.
Oh, gosh, yes.
And that's good for consumers. They're doing well in Consumer Reports testing. So, kind of good on Toyota for seeing this technology, refining it, sticking with it. Mm-hmm. And it shows in the reliability surveys also that Toyota hybrids tend to be very reliable.
Even your word refinement, you think of the early ones where we said, oh, there a lot of electrical noise and regen braking that we
and
were
there's
so
no
obvious.
Power.
And now you don't feel any or hear any of that. It's like you wouldn't know if you didn't know.
And not just that. I mean, they, for the most part now, they drive nicer.
Yes.
They
yes,
went from
exactly.
like the penalty box
Right.
to like actually the more refined, quieter,
Yep.
smoother powertrain, which is awesome. And again, they're being mainstreamed on other manufacturers, not just the Toyota
Right.
game anymore. I mean, you look at, Ford, Hyundai, Honda, they're really just mainstreaming these hybrids. And yeah, I mean, just there's no compromise. And actually, speaking of compromise, I mean, one of the top picks, the Ford Maverick, which is just, up until now, they didn't even do an all-wheel drive hybrid, which is kind of like,
It's
you
a
want the
truck.
hybrid?
Yeah.
Really? I got to get front-wheel drive on my pickup truck in order to get the hybrid? And at least they're finally remedying that.
Right.
So just becoming more and more mainstream.
Yeah, the Maverick is one of those cars when I think about, it's like, how did Ford do this so successfully?
Yeah.
And why haven't there been other manufacturers bringing out small, fuel-efficient pickup trucks?
Yeah.
They're such ahead of the game, and it's just, yeah. I mean, right, exactly. Why aren't we seeing that, that little Toyota pickup truck, that looks like the 80s pickup truck, with a RAV4 underneath it or something like that? I mean, it seems like so many of them could be doing this and making just really useful vehicles.
And we all three of us sit here at the table like to travel and you go especially overseas and you see these
Right.
small
they
trucks,
exist.
Yeah.
and you wonder, are we going to see more of that? So along the lines of electrification, and we have a number of models on the list that are electrified. Cost a fair amount of money. We got a Tesla Model Y. We've got, a BMW plug-in X5 as part of our top picks. Big money here.
Yeah.
But the beauty of Consumer Reports top picks is you don't have to spend a lot to get a car on the list. And, we kind of mentioned in passing the Nissan Sentra.
Right.
It's kind of an interesting story in and of itself. How did the Sentra make the list?
Well, you have performance, and we've all said that right along. That the Sentra was a sportier small car. From the minute we tested it, we said, it's kind of zippy and kind of fun. But they also brought along, Jake mentioned it, the highway speed AEB, standard equipment on your $25,000 car.
Blind spot warning.
Rear
is
cross
standard.
traffic.
Raw cross traffic
Right.
warning, standard.
Right.
And again, it's kind of amazing seeing a vehicle at this price,
Yep.
having all that equipment, when again, we routinely see luxury vehicles,
Right.
vehicles that are so much more expensive without that equipment. It's a small car is not what it used to be, right? I mean, it's like you could have that equipment and you get, higher trims to that thing. It looks terrific.
To have the no-brainer for $25,000, that's awesome.
Right, and
That's awesome.
And Nissan gave it some handling chops.
They did.
The car,
Absolutely.
the car drives really
It's a
pretty
nice
well.
car to drive. It really
And
is.
I think Nissan gets probably unfairly, but it's the butt end of jokes about when you think about manufacturers.
Yeah.
Oh, Nissan, Honda's going to acquire Nissan, which didn't pan out or anything. But you can't just write off a manufacturer wholesale. You've got to look carefully within the model line because something like the Sentra is like you should consider it, even if you would not consider Nissan in general. Consider that.
And you make it a better deal because it's not the one that everybody else is looking at necessarily. I don't know. What were you going to say?
What's the deal with Nissan? So what I wanted to talk about, that was for you, Dave,
Yeah, it's for Dave.
our producer. But no, but the thing with Nissan is it's really interesting about it because, Nissan, right, I mean, there was talk about Honda buying them or merging or whatever. And, part of what Nissan's doing is, again, they are the Nissan Sentra.
Yep.
If you want to go and create a vehicle that's going to make you tons and tons of money, it's not a really inexpensive car that's filled with equipment.
Right.
You're right. So, I mean, kind of like credit for Nissan to produce that vehicle, to have that equipment. I mean, they're really kind of putting their values there by doing that. Now, if you want to go make a whole lot of money, you're going to make a bunch of luxury vehicles that are flashy, right?
Or pickup trucks.
Or pickup.
Which Nissan is also having
Well, they're
issues
also
with.
having that. But it's like, what's interesting about Nissan, I think part of the reason why I think they are struggling a bit is you look at their higher end vehicles, their Infinitis. I mean, again, I'm old. I remember the M35 and the G35. They had some fabulous, amazing
Oh my gosh,
luxury cars. That's not what Infiniti is right now. So they're kind of struggling a little bit on the high end, trying to differentiate themselves. But those low end mainstream vehicles, are pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
are. Maybe not as profitable,
Yeah.
but certainly
How many
nice.
Rogues do you see? So
Oh, I think they sell really well.
yeah. I told you my neighbor has 4 in
and-
their driveway. 4
What?
Rogues.
And
lined
did
up.
you get like a special deal?
I guess.
You get 3, you get 1 free?
Buy one, get 3.
2 adult age daughters, and well, there's 4 Rogues. in
They're
their
pretty
driveway.
simple.
Yeah.
Parts are easy to get.
Yeah.
To get. I mean,
Well,
Yeah.
you get an extra.
right.
Yes. Buy one, get one.
And we mentioned profitability and success and all that. A lot of car companies get their money from selling pickup trucks.
Yeah.
Nissan has had a bear of a time trying to sell their Titan pickup truck,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
generally for other manufacturers would represent big profit centers.
Yeah.
And the Titan has been miserable.
Yeah.
The Frontier is okay.
We had a
but it's so Nissan's got to take the wins where they can get them, and
Right.
they'll probably be happy to see at least the Sentra on this list.
Well, and what's interesting is, the unevenness of manufacturers. So, I mean, when you look at our top picks, there's a lot of different manufacturers
Yep.
that are represented
Mm-hmm.
there, and again, like, you mentioned the Tesla Model Y. We're not recommending all the Teslas, right? We're
Right.
not recommending the Cybertruck. We're not recommending, some of their higher end vehicles. So you almost have to look at the manufacturer and look at their product lines. And there's some amazing products
Yeah.
in each one of these brands, and there's some not so good ones. So, I mean, we have a lot of information on and actually a lot of it's free on our site. If you look at each one of the brand, you can understand what the product line looks like and what they do generally. But it's not always totally consistent in those product lines.
And there really is something for almost everyone if you're looking to buy a new car.
Right.
The top picks, if you got some money, there's Lexus, there's BMW.
Yeah.
If you don't have so much money,
There's reasonable.
there's Ford, there's Toyota.
By
there's-
intention.
And,
Right.
and a manufacturer we haven't even touched on.
I think
Subaru.
Well, that's what I was.
Come on.
You were heading where I was
Yeah,
heading.
yeah,
In that, as much as we talk about the new to the list ones, the Mavericks and the Sentras, you can't help but think about the ones that have been there year over year over year. The Highlanders, the Foresters that are still there. Yeah.
Maverick's not brand new. To the
Not
list,
brand new, but yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Yeah, you look at things like Forester. It's been
Yeah.
for a while.
So Subaru has figured out a lot of good formulas for their vehicles. Certainly in terms of how we test them and what's important to us as automotive experts and reviewers.
But that's really interesting. It's what's important to, I would say what's important to normal consumers.
Right.
And that's what's really interesting about it. So one of the things that we don't, I mean, we're talking about Nissans, we're talking about their profit and loss or whatever.
It was talking Nissan, not talking cars.
I mean, look, obviously we're not looking at the company, and their business
Correct.
practice. We're obviously not looking at the styling. We're not looking at these types of things when we're choosing these picks. We're looking at what consumers tell us are important. Again, going back to things like, visibility and reliability and safety. And that's why our picks don't necessarily look like everyone else's. They're just going back to that. And a Subaru is such a great example because you know what? Hey, there's a redesigned Subaru Forester. Is it? I mean, out of any company,
That's a
I
fair
don't
argument.
see it,
If
right.
you know
Yeah.
the Forester, you
I
know
mean,
exactly what Jake is
the
talking
last
about.
tell you a
couple of
great story
generations,
about it.
it's hard to. I mean, they are not building these vehicles that are like flashy and exciting. They're a little boring,
Yeah.
but they do things so well, right?
Right.
And you could see out of them, and they're easy to use, and they're quiet, and they're comfortable. They do the important things. So no, we don't really care about the styling and how cool it looks, or what colors are available.
Right.
Although
Just
the
consumers
writers
either.
among us sort of care about the styling because we do talk about it, but
We do.
it's not part of
But
our
it's not
evaluation.
acknowledge it.
Not part of our evaluation.
And I do think it identifies, but just a great small story is that my mother and I just were in a crash. I was driving. She was with me. She's 87 years old. We were in her Subaru Forester. And guess what? They totaled her car. And we had to go shopping for she's 87. So I'm like, okay, did we buy a new car? And we didn't. We said, okay, let's go look for a used vehicle. Who knows how much longer you'll be driving? And I said to her, what do you think you want? And she said, I want a Forester. And just exactly what you said. She wanted it familiar.
Yeah.
She didn't want a lot of technology. I can't believe I'm saying this, but we actually Ford did not take the version, forwent the version that had the blind spot warning and the rear cross traffic warning because she said, I don't drive much on the highway anymore.
There
I don't
you go.
need to merge. This one is a little more simple for me. And we ended up with a 2022 Forester because she just felt like at her age and her driving, she wanted it exactly the same. And visibility, to her point, was exactly
Right.
why.
And
So
access.
we were in another Forester.
Yeah.
So,
for access,
so if you are, looking for what kind of vehicle you're looking for, and you are Jen's mom, write in the comments. And
Right.
you can ask, and Jen will help you out.
Exactly. We'll go through it.
Wouldn't it be helpful if Jen's mom knew someone at Consumer Reports that could help her find a car?
And I admit I was pushing for the blind spot version, the rear cross. I said, you might use this. You're, limited range of motion. You're an older individual. I don't drive on the highway. And she doesn't.
Well, she's always been putting you in your
Very
place.
practical.
So
Very practical.
she's
choice.
continuing.
And she paid a little less.
So
Right, yeah.
when I think about Consumer Reports top picks list, I go back to my automotive geekdom of
Yeah.
when I was a kid. Car and Drivers 10 Best, always a great issue. I always looked at that.
Right.
That the Road and Track would have like the best driver's car.
Sure.
And I would always go through the list
Mm-hmm.
and I would imagine, okay, you got to pick one
Yeah.
to drive off into the sunset. So for you guys, if you had to pick one vehicle on our top picks list to
on
drive
the
to
list?
drive away,
To drive away.
what would it be?
Oh my goodness.
This
What,
is
do I have to
putting
pay
us on
for
the
it? Like I
spot.
put my own money
Yeah, do
here,
I have to
or
pay
you're just
for
giving
it?
me any one?
Let's say
I want the rules here.
okay. Let's say price independent. You just get what anyone you want.
Oh, I got,
what
I got
would
my
it be?
X5 plug-in hybrid.
Okay. Jake's breaking the bank, but that's okay. That vehicle really dazzled a bunch of us, didn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's kind of amazing how it does everything. But I mean, again, if I'm putting my own money, I'd probably buy a Maverick hybrid.
Okay.
I mean, just what a great Swiss Army knife of a vehicle.
Right.
Maverick
Right.
hybrid all-wheel drive in 2025.
Yeah. That's right.
Ms. Stockberg?
I think I'd go with a Camry. I think I would go with a Camry.
I was
Yeah.
going to bet money. I was going to
That
say
I
was
would
gonna,
say Camry.
I was going to say you were going to say Subaru.
I thought you would say Forester.
I swear to God,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, Jen Subaru
Well,
is like
I'm not
practically.
my mother's daughter, apparently.
Okay.
No, she's got one.
I
in
would
the
go with
fleet.
the Camry.
All right, and for me, thanks for asking.
Yeah.
it was-
We don't really care.
No, we do. We do.
This is a joke that Monticello and I have all the time. The Camry to me is the top pick.
Yeah,
It's
it's
bar
all
none.
around.
It's pretty
I
impressive.
love the way it drives. I love the fuel economy. I love
the
the
fuel-
cruising range.
Sure.
Yep.
The simple
Yeah.
controls.
Yep.
I just I
Reliable
don't
as the day is long.
exactly. I don't understand why people hate on the Camry or say it's boring.
They haven't driven one lately because it drives pretty nice.
You know, you say to the talking cars audience out there, check out the Camry.
Yeah.
Stop making jokes about it and go drive it.
Yeah.
just mentioning all those other lists. I just want to throw another really important thing where if you look at some of these other lists, sometimes they only look at vehicles that just came out this year.
Yeah.
So you look at North American Car of the Year or whatever, a lot of them are like, well, of the cars that just came out. And, I can't, emphasize this enough. When you're out there shopping for a car, don't limit yourself to the ones that just came out this year. In fact, those ones that came out last year or the year before are going to be not only the more reliable choices, our data shows all the time, right? Growing pains have been done, but also you're going to get a better deal on it, right? If you got the first one on the lot, which unfortunately we always buy the first one on the lot
Yeah.
because we want to test the certain.
And we pay for it.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to
we pay for it?
negotiate. Exactly.
You talked about Subaru and the Forester not being a radical redesign.
Right.
And it reminds me of all the things that we talk about with reliability in that you're not redoing the powertrain
Right.
drastically.
Don't
bringing all
break
the,
what. Don't fix what's not broken.
and that has been Subaru's kind of MO. Same thing with Toyota in many ways. they have systems that they use over and over, and that tends to be the more reliable models.
Yeah, basically take the headlights and the taillights, bisect them so they're kind of look like, and then you're done.
But
Redesigned.
I just not stagnant. Like you take that new Forester, that is so much quieter than years of old.
It's tweaks.
It's
Right.
tweaks.
But I think Jake
It's
is saying,
refinement.
Jake's saying
Always
you
improvement,
look at the
though.
new Forester and it doesn't look radical.
definitely
You know
not.
it's a Forester.
You know it's a
You
Forester.
don't think, oh my God,
Absolutely.
what's that?
But
Right,
for
right.
for the Jen's moms of the world,
Yes.
that's exactly
Yeah.
what they wanted.
And
it may be exactly what they want.
I think it's probably a fair
Yeah.
argument that most mainstream car buyers in the United States, they don't want all the attention that a Cybertruck brings or a Volkswagen ID Buzz. They want
That's
something,
true.
that's just kind of, I just want a car. I don't want to dazzle people. I don't
Yeah.
want to impress people. And that is what sells in most volume, right?
Yeah.
A Ford
Yeah.
F-150 looks like a Ford
Yes, it
F-150.
does.
And
Yeah.
you're not, if you drive a new one down the street, it's like, oh, is that the new F-1? No, it's
If you want a vehicle that is going to, get you on conversation everywhere you go, we're not going to be the ones giving you that advice.
Right. But you bring up you just mentioned the trucks, that there isn't a top pick full-size pickup truck
Right.
so there's not all the cars, there's not all the categories always,
Right.
Yeah.
because we also are selecting different categories. Right now, the full-size pickups don't have a lot of recommended models in there. So the big trucks are not there. So there are some categories that aren't in the list either.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
goes back to my earlier point, how we don't pick cars that we like them. I don't know if you guys have
Not
ever
just
heard
we,
this,
the country
but
likes them, yeah.
people have come up to me, friends, neighbors, people I don't even know, and say, "Why don't you like fill in the blank car?"
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And it's like it's nothing. There's nothing to do with whether or not
It has nothing to do
we
with
like it.
us personally.
Right.
And
I would have like the Miatas all the top.
yeah, I was like, there's
All
no
the
Ford
picks.
Mustang GT there. Wow.
Yeah.
Right. That's something we like.
So
So
what was funny too, also, you're like, which one should we buy? I'm like, I don't want to limit myself just to the top picks, and neither should anyone have to.
yeah. And that goes to our point where there are a lot of cars that score very well in our ratings within these categories. They didn't make the top picks cut, but they're
they're
still
recommended. They're
really
great
good
choices.
cars.
That's right.
So you go to consumerreports.org and you look on the ratings and you find the vehicle that best fits your needs, because as we say, what works for us might not work for you. And that's always like an aspect of our road test. When we talk about seats.
Yep.
Make sure you sit in the seats, because the seats that fit us might not fit you.
Yep.
And consumerreports.org has all this information. Again, the article is free. It's awesome. Go in there, dive deep, and do your research and find the best car.
Yep.
And that's kind of putting a cap on 2025 top picks, which is an awesome topic and always an exciting.
Yes.
In terms of publishing, you have these seminal issues, and the April issue, what we used to call is the big car issue, was always an event, and now it's more online and it's more digital and all that other stuff. But anyway, we've got lots of great automotive information at consumerreports.org.
No less exciting.
Exactly. Which brings us to your questions. We love them. Text 30-second videos. Keep them coming to at cr.org/talking cars. That's cr.org/talking cars. And if we use your question on our podcast, we can send you a t-shirt or some groovy swag. We'll get you the CR branded stuff. So keep them coming. First up is Dave from Norfolk, Virginia, who writes, "Sometimes I find it hard to relate to CR's survey results to my personal experience with a vehicle, and a lot harder to use the results in a purchase decision. Some of it is that it's hard to judge the severity of the issue or the ease of the workaround. How do you calibrate the responders? How do you differentiate between an issue that took the vehicle out of service and an issue that needed repair, but the vehicle remained usable?" That is a great question, diving into the hows and whys of our reliability. And Jen, I'm going to turn to you for an answer.
Right. And so just let me say to Dave and everybody, we have an amazing team of survey researchers at CR who design the surveys. And they actually try to simplify them as much as they can while still getting the good data. It's about getting the answers, making sure they're as objective as possible, et cetera. So in terms of our reliability survey, which we get a huge response to, and it's extensive. It takes some time to fill out. They make it as straightforward as possible. So to answer Dave's question, we do not ask them, the responders, to be calibrated in terms of what's more severe. We simply say, did you have a problem? what area was it in? Was it powertrain? Was it squeaks and rattles? Was it body hardware? Where does it belong? And we give examples of that. Where the severity gets added on is when Anita and Stephen are doing the analysis. At that point, yes, something that's a powertrain level issue that may put a car out of service is weighted more in the reliability score than something that may be a body hardware type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, in the survey, there's a whole bunch of follow-up questions. So if you're like, yeah, I had an engine problem, we're not done. Now, years ago, we used to have this paper survey and said, I have an engine problem, I'm done with it. Now we're asking what kind of subcomponent? What was the problem? Did it require a rebuild? Was it a reflash of the electronics? We're asking these follow-up questions, and we're actually having them actually write in their own words what happened. So that analysis is actually going and determining how severe each one of those problems are, as opposed to saying, again, every engine problem is not the same. And that is also interesting, because obviously there's other things, some people will talk about problems per 100. Again, we don't talk about problems per 100 because it doesn't make sense to talk about problems per 100 because every problem is not the same.
Right.
I would much prefer to have a smaller problems, higher problems per 100 if they're annoyances, as opposed to a lower problems per 100 of things that really take the car out of commission.
Right. And because people, to just be devil's advocate, they say, well, a squeak and a rattle, I can still drive the car, right? What's the problem? Why are you killing that car for a squeak and a rattle? I can still drive it.
And that's why things like that are not weighted heavily at all.
Right.
In fact, also, I need to go to get into the nitty gritty of it. A lot of the electronics issues,
bring this up.
They are very common, but they are not weighed that heavily. And there's for two reasons. One is, generally, obviously there's the ones that are weighed heavier. If like the whole screen goes out, now I can't actually see, my speed or what gear I'm in.
Yeah.
That's a bigger issue. But again, if I can't get my radio working or my CarPlay's not connecting, one, it's not a huge deal. It's not taking the car to commission. And two, what we have found year after year is that very often those things get rectified very quickly.
Right.
A reflash or a new
Over the
update,
air,
they'll get better. So we're trying to determine what's going to happen next year.
Yeah.
Those types of problems. Again, major engine problems, that's not going to get fixed overnight.
Right.
The electronic problems can be.
Right. Yeah. And people bring up recalls, like, it had a recall, and that makes it unreliable. But as we've kind of learned and studied, a recall is usually a one-time thing.
Right.
Right. And you take it to the dealer fixes it, and it's done.
And for recalls, we do ask about whether or not, we are only asking if you have the problem that had to do with the recall.
Right.
So if you just say, hey, the car has to come in for a recall, you didn't actually experience a problem. They're trying to prevent a problem from happening.
Yes.
So it is a little bit different. But again, in terms of your mileage may vary, your mileage will vary. We're talking about statistically which cars are more likely to have a problem. And every once in a while you're like, well, this unreliable car, I didn't have any problems. Well, good for you because you're lucky. And you might have a reliable car and it might have a problem. Statistically, it was out of whack, but again, it's possible to have a problem with a reliable car. It's possible to have a good experience with an unreliable vehicle. Does not surprise me.
Right. Reliability guru Anita Lamb says, we're trying to improve your odds.
Yes.
That's it.
But there's no guarantee.
Right.
You can have the most reliable car in our survey and it can break. You can have the least reliable car in our survey and it can run fine.
Right.
And that is just life.
And getting back to the tools, what is your tolerance for that?
Right.
How far, if you do break down, what does that do to your life?
Right.
Do you have another car in the driveway for a spare, or you can borrow one, or is it you can't get to work and back? There's those decisions that internally have to happen for everything.
And once again, the answer is consumerreports.org to find a reliable car.
Yeah.
So yes, thanks for your question. Good question. Reliability analysis it can be complicated, but we try to make it simple. And we have the data to back up why we say what we say.
Yep.
Okay, next up is Victor, who writes, when you test the brakes of hybrids, you conduct the test when the car is in B and doesn't make any difference. And Jake, you are so perfectly positioned to answer this question because your family has owned Priuses, and in the Prius shift lever, There's a B there.
There's a B. Yes, there's a B.
So what do you have for Victor?
So well, first of all, the B is with like Prius and some other vehicles. It's analogous to kind of like low range. So it allows the engine to kind of rev higher or more engine braking or more regen. So you don't have to rely on the brakes so much. But to the answer of that, and actually it's very similar about like, if you're doing brake tests in a low gear or put it in low, does it make a difference? It doesn't make a difference. It does not. It does not. Really, the brakes are so powerful on cars. You've got enough braking force. You're just basically working with those tires not to lock them up. It doesn't really help you to be in a lower gear or B. And interestingly enough, I used to do a lot of car racing and stuff like that. And people are like, oh, you downshift. I'm like, no, just use brakes. Your brakes are going to apply enough pressure.
Well, and it's when we talk about our braking and when Joe's doing it a lot, we consider it like emergency braking.
Yeah,
He is full on that pedal. What is the shortest distance that you can come to a stop because there's something in front of you? It's not that daily driving where a B or regen or something can help you preserve your brakes.
And to the point of like a low range, shifting down or putting in a B, was really more about is like I'm going down this really long hill. I don't want to ride my brakes. I don't want to overheat them, which we call brake fade. That's what it's about, not that emergency stop.
Right.
Your brakes are going to be
the Mount Washington Road in New Hampshire.
That's
there
it.
You go.
Yes. That's right.
You don't want to ride them all the way down.
That's what the B is for. Use the B.
Yes.
What the B is for.
Drop the B.
And we do our emergency braking on our track in dry surface and wet surfaces.
Right.
If it gets too cold, we won't do that. It has to be at least 32 or above.
It's hard to get
to do
wet
that.
surfaces below 32.
Right. Then we have frozen surfaces. All right. We are going to put the brakes on this podcast, but not until we have one more question. And this is Peter from Alexandria, Virginia. I enjoyed your coverage of bicycle racks for cars, but I'd like to have the ability to carry bikes inside the vehicle. I have a Honda Element, now 20 years old, that I consider the ultimate bike mobile. Flip the rear seats up, and I can roll the two bikes in with both wheels on. Unfortunately, there's no new vehicle like that available in the U.S. Bikes might fit upright with both wheels in a regular U.S. market minivan, but those are huge and expensive. Next option is the one that can fit two road bikes upright with the front wheel off. But which vehicles have the inside roof clearance for this? It would help to have the floor-to-ceiling measurement in the cargo area, but I never see that measurement specified for vehicles. Would Consumer Reports consider adding this measurement to their car reviews? I know dog people would also be interested for dog crates. So Jake, you and I specifically are among many bikers in a Consumer Reports Auto Test, and you are uniquely qualified to address this.
Uniquely qualified. So actually, it's funny you mentioned the Element because I used to do a lot of mountain biking when we had our Element, and that was my car of choice. So I totally agree.
For exactly that reason.
For the exact same reason. And it's too bad there's nothing like that today.
I was trying to
So what's interesting is you talk about the measurements. So we do actually do these measurements, right? We actually measure. We have I'm going to say MERP.
Maximum expandable rectangular parallelepiped. MERP. Wow. There you go.
Well done.
You have to go
Jen.
to school to learn how to say that.
But it's basically
especially nerdy.
Or to understand what it means.
We figure out the largest box that will fit in each one of these vehicles. So so we do take those measurements. And actually, I was looking at some of the measurements, and what's interesting is there is one vehicle. Again, it's been discontinued, but much later than the Element. So up until just a few years ago, you could get the Ford Transit Connect, which actually is just as tall, and you can do the same thing without that vehicle. So a much newer used vehicle that has that option. But when it comes down to SUVs and non-minivans, it gets much smaller. And really, you almost need to bring your bike to the dealer and try it out. And the thing is there's so many different variations because how big is your bike? I've my kid's medium, road bike is much smaller than my large road bike. And there's a lot of different things. And I got a tri-bike, and that's really hard because the handlebars are all kind of weird. So there's a bunch of different variations. But it is interesting. So we do take those measurements. And actually, if anyone's, could let us know in the comments. Is this something that, a lot of people would like to see? I mean, look, if you look at our compare and you look at our, ratings results, there's a lot of data there. And sometimes we think it's maybe even a little overwhelming, but I would love to hear from people who are using this. We do show the cubic feet, but we could go and add to it length, width, and height of the biggest box.
We could call it a bikeability.
Yeah.
Bikeability or dogability. Dog crateability.
Dog crateability.
Dogability.
And Jen, I just perked up when Jake said, bring your bike to the car dealer when you're shopping, because you say, bring your child's safety seats.
Yeah.
To the dealer to make sure
Bring
they
a lot of
install
things.
right.
Yeah.
So
the dealer's going to be like, oh no, here they come.
Wow.
They got
What has
dogs,
Consumer
they
Reports
got
been
kids.
telling people?
And
what are they doing?
I can see the comments to this question, just firing in it on YouTube. Just get bike racks. I have to say, Peter, I hate bike racks. Bike racks drive me crazy. I love being able to put a bike inside a car because bike racks are just kind of annoying unless you've got a really expensive like hitch mount and all that stuff. And we also have done things to carrying bikes. A couple summers ago, we had a Jeep Gladiator, which is their little pickup truck, and someone I know kind of signed it out all summer because of this nice little padding on the tailgate, and he put his bike on there. And wow, look at that!
I also know, and it's probably the case here too for Peter, is that you guys have some very expensive bikes.
It's true. And having it inside a car means it's locked up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's that too.
Sometimes you tell me what you paid for them.
So
like,
Peter, we feel your pain.
Yeah.
It is amazing how popular the Honda Element got after they stopped selling it.
Yes.
I see them
I just
bring a
saw one this
trailer, and all of a
morning.
sudden it's like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive. Why didn't you all people buy this when Honda was selling it? Maybe they'd have another generation of Element.
Bring back the Element. We'll start a petition.
Yeah.
So Peter, great question. Bikeability, maybe a future test that we'll consider doing. But that will bring us to the end of this podcast, which of course was produced by super producer Dave Abrams, expertly edited by Andrew. I still play hockey Belize and the famous Anatoly the Great Shubsky. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and the topics that we discussed. And just a reminder, keep your questions coming. Go to cr.org/talkingcars. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.